Hello, everyone. Welcome to a Wall Street from Main Street podcast. My name is Mo Daoud, and today's special guest is we have two returning guests, Bill Murphy, the Chairman of GATA, and Jeff Nielson, Chief Editor of BullionBullsCanada.com. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Mo. Nice to be here.
And just the man, so it's good to be on a platform with him.
Well, I appreciate having both of you on at the same time because there's a lot been going on in the gold and silver market. How's the gold and silver market been treating you guys? Are you exhausted, or are you frustrated? Are you happy that there's bargain prices out there?
Well, a little bit of everything, I think, from my end. What about you, Bill?
It sucks. You got Doug Casey coming out, who I know personally. I've gone into my commentary about, I take the guy, meet him, I take him out to lunch with friends, and all he's done is dump on us, and then he comes out today and says how marvelous is the setback is. Are you kidding me? The industry is in a depression. He's happy because he grew up of a wealthy kid going to school with Bill Clinton, and he's happy because for some reason about the setback. So why people are all going in, all the people I know are going out of business? Sorry, it's terrible. I think it's going to explode soon. But this is the most horrendous time I've been in a business in my whole life.
Yeah, if you look at the numbers, the real economic numbers, like the real unemployment rate, which is above 20%, those are Great Depression numbers right there.
Well, that's exactly it. And, I echo what Bill said, because you see these quasi-mainstream individuals, like Doug Casey, and there's a few others that are in a similar group, and they get me really angry because they're essentially quasi-apologists that attempt to legitimize what's been going on here when, it's nothing but pure crime. And so, you see these people who know better, and then they try to explain things as if there's some sort of rational reason for what's taking place. That's certainly infuriating.
That's right. That's what I can say. All I can add to that.
Yeah, if the American people actually pay attention to what's going on in the economic and financial world and how it works, especially the role of the Federal Reserve and the relationship with the big bank, they'll be amazed and angry over what's going on. But they're not. The government's doing a good job keeping them zeroed in on things that's not very important right now.
Mo, it'll be like everything else. Nothing. Yep. People won't think anything until it affects them personally, or a big scandal, it blows up. Whether it was Enron or Madoff and the whole thing. And quite frankly, after all the years I've been doing this, I think it's going to go back to always the way it is, because Jefferson talked about the big banks and what he was doing with to the people. And money and power rules. I just hope that God will be around long enough to expose it, and it won't because we can do it. The physical market will blow these guys up, and then it'll become a scale, and when the whole thing manifests itself, everyone's going to say, what happened and why? At least we'll have some answers, and I'll have that satisfaction.
Yeah, and I agree. And the Jefferson, the Washington, they didn't want a central bank when they created a constitution, and they know why they didn't want a central bank, because they didn't want a small group of people having so much power.
Well, it's interesting because I was just doing, some research primarily through this documentary, The Money Masters. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's a wonderful piece. And it got particularly into, some of Jefferson's quotes, and the one that went along with that is that he didn't want the central banking cabal and the corporations that grew up with it. And, of course, this is the whole thing, is that you get this cabal of financial power, and then it becomes this syndicate that seizes control of the entire economy. And, essentially what we have here is fascism, the marriage of big business with government for the sake of plundering the entire economy. And that's the model we're looking at right now.
Jeff has it nailed.
And I agree with you there. There's certain part of our economy where the government and the corporation are in bed together, and then it's too much cooperation there, not enough free market and proper regulation going on, especially the Wall Street big banks, or the too big to fail banks. So Anyway, let's shift gears here and talk about the gold and silver market and what's been happening in the past few months. I know both of you guys are in the gold and silver manipulation camp, along with Eric Sprott and other prominent investors out there. And Jeff, you wrote an interesting piece about bullion leasing, and interestingly enough, Eric Sprott also put out an article regarding gold bullion leasing. First of all, for people out there that are not familiar with that concept, could you explain it to them in layman terms? Because when I first found out about it a few years ago, it took me a while to grasp the concept of how it worked and why they were doing it.
Well, it's funny. There's a bunch of people that wrote all on this same subject lately, including Ted Butler. And in fact, Ed Steer thought that I might have actually borrowed some material from Ted's article because I guess he thought it sounded quite similar. So I'll take that as a compliment. But I'm still just basically getting a grasp of this myself. And essentially, of course, leasing is a form of borrowing. And so, this is what should immediately raise questions in people's minds, because you have a hard asset, and of course, you have the mainstream media telling us all the time, gold and silver, they don't generate any income. So the question immediately becomes, why would anybody want to borrow an asset that doesn't generate income? You can't use it, you can't consume it. What's the whole point? And so, the moment you actually look into what this market is all about, you see that there's no legitimate business purpose. People can talk about, hedging, quote unquote, but the fact of the matter is, it's a very flimsy pretext for facilitating all of this shorting activity. And as I've written in other previous commentaries before this, the entire activity of shorting is of dubious legitimacy because, in fact, there's many ways in which actors in markets can hedge, and shorting is only one of them, and it's the most destructive manner. So the idea that we have to have shorting in markets and leasing and all that goes with it as some sort of price discovery thing or for hedging, it's really a sort of a false paradigm that's being created for us.
And so how does it work?
To add there,
go ahead.
It might be of interest to your listeners. Brian Hinchcliffe, the CEO of Kirkland Lake Gold, good friend of ours, spoke at one of our conferences. He used to work for Goldman Sachs subsidiary, and we're talking about 1988 even. God, it's 25 years ago. He could borrow what Rubin, who's a brilliant guy, former Treasury Secretary and CEO of Goldman Sachs, realized when interest rates were 7-8%, he could borrow gold from the central banks for 1%, let's say, instead of 7-8%, sell that gold into the market and use it to fund his operations. Then a whole bunch of other people followed him. But the key here, what we're talking about, is he used the same thing when he became Treasury Secretary, followed by Lawrence Summers, who wrote the paper Gibson's Paradox and the Gold Standard, and he did the same thing to suppress the gold price for the U.S. government, and it's got out of control. And here we are.
And that's an interesting point there. So you could see that this concept is more popular and being used for other things as well. And so
one of the things specifically to suppress the gold price. That's what Jeff has done such a great job in explaining. The gold leasing thing, it just got out of control, and everybody got doing it. And it's complicated, quite frankly. It's like a murder trial. It's so complicated, but it's all there, and the evidence is there for people who want to look into it.
And yeah, you and Jeff had done a good job covering the gold bullion leasing concept and how it affects the gold and silver market. Now, Eric Sprott said in his article that he believed the gold bullion leasing is the sole reason why the gold and silver market collapsed in the past few months. Do you agree or disagree, or do you think there's other factors that came along with that?
Well, I personally look to first of all, the Cyprus deal, the looting of bank accounts in Cyprus, and then all the events that went along with that. And of course, we heard all these rumors that the big money was warned months in advance of what was going to take place, and their bank accounts had been cleaned out long before the bank holiday and the seizure of assets. And of course, we look at the gold market and we see an exact parallel. At the same time that we saw these big money players moving their money out of Cyprus bank accounts, the great paper liquidation began in the gold market. And that's when we saw the holdings of the major bullion ETFs and funds plummet in an unprecedented manner that we've never seen before throughout their entire existence. And so, I can't possibly consider that to be a coincidence. For me, this was a totally choreographed scenario. And the interesting part, though, is that when the gold liquidation first began back in the early part of February, we didn't see the price go down at that time. And, of course, the point here is that, once that massive liquidation began, if anything, they had to prop the prices up to stop all that selling pressure from dragging the prices down. So the question becomes then, why didn't this crash in the gold market occur early in February or at the latest, beginning of March, rather than all the way being delayed until the beginning of April? It's almost like the bankers were, in fact, holding up the market for those 6 weeks or so before they were finally ready to sort of reveal what was taking place by allowing the collapse to occur.
And Bill, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, Jeff knows what he's talking about. I mean, simplistically, it was a 1 in 4,000 year event selling in gold. I think gold dropped $236 in 30 hours or something like that. And once again, the CFTC, impotent, does nothing about it. What about position limit trading, everything? There was no outside reason for it. All of a sudden, someone sells 400 tons of gold at the market, and it drops like that. It's just so, honestly, it's juvenile. It's silly. And the fact that someone said, okay, like Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, who are those guys? Well, nothing ever happens. There's no rule of law in America. The CFTC is ridiculous. I had the highest regard for Bart Chilton, one of their commissioners. I don't anymore. He did one good thing, and he's done nothing since. He's a joke.
Yeah, I have no faith that the CFTC
No, that's
will...
an understatement. No faith. They are pathetic. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think the government agency will do anything about this. They haven't done it in the past, so why now? And
well, if I might say,
one person
quick thing. Big Swear came out with, who was a GATA supporter, great guy. He said, making a point of it, it's a really great point, that they've had a 5-year investigation into the silver market by the CFTC, and now they're running up to the statute of limitations. That is remarkable. They're just letting it go against the CFTC against J.P. Morgan. It's the biggest fraud in American history, and nobody cares. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you, Bill. So anyway, I was saying that I have no faith that the government agency would do anything about this, and that the one man in the CFTC, it won't be enough to look into this and do something about it. It has to be as a whole, that something must be done by the agency about this, and I don't think that will happen. So, Bill, I wanted to ask you, is there anything that you learned from this gold and silver takedown the past few months that you haven't noticed before? Is there anything new that you picked up, or anything that you learned that you want
to defer to Jeff, but nothing new. It's just that this is probably the best risk-reward opportunity for the shares, gold and silver, and all of mankind. I think the move up eventually will but at least be equal to the internet thing. They just don't have the physical to carry this out much longer. I think this was a game plan for many reasons we don't have time to get into, but part of it was so that some of the banks that have gone along with the U.S. government on this gold borrowing leasing thing can get out. And we thought it was happening in silver in the July open interest. That's happened anyway. The point is, it's getting ready to go bonkers. It may not be next week, but it will be by this fall, and your listeners can, knock on wood, count on it.
Yeah, and when that time comes, who knows? But from looking at this demand and supply fundamentals for both gold and silver, there's no way the prices can stay this low forever, especially when you're seeing a lot of gold and silver mining companies cutting down production, going layoff, shutting down mine, putting their mine to quote unquote care and maintenance until gold and silver prices recover. And yet we're seeing astonishing demand from countries like India and China. And China is on pace to acquire over 1,000 tons of gold, which is 100% of the total mine supply out there. So the prices can't stay here forever.
Well, it's a matter of sort of which variables hit the market first. Now, of course, the thing with the mine supply aspect of things is that's a very delayed reaction dynamic in the sector. So yes, we're seeing the destruction on the supply side, but that's something that doesn't actually impact the market today. It's something that's really going to bite into the market, a year or two down the road, when the pipeline of supply that was expected to reach the market has been rudely interrupted. Conversely, the physical buying is a totally different issue in that, this is something that has immediate impact. And so, this is why we've seen such fanatical action in India, with the Indian government itself being pressured into taking all these moves to discourage demand in its domestic market because they can't handle this sort of incredible demand in the immediate term.
And also, India is trying to ban gold import, which resulted in gold smuggling. I read an article that India is smuggling over $5 billion worth of gold. And also, the demand for silver is going up as well. So isn't this a good example of the law of unintended consequences?
Yep.
Well, for sure. You can't manipulate everything simultaneously, and when you push in one direction, there's a counter reaction in another area, and so they attack the Indian gold market. It pushes people into silver, but of course they didn't totally ban imports, and this is kind of the interesting point is we're in this capitalist economy where everything's done in credit, and what they actually did is the Indian government told its bullion banks they were forbidden from importing any bullion on credit. The bullion trade in the world's largest gold market had to operate on a cash basis. So this is just another silly example of the efforts to totally distort the market here, because of course it's like we have one set of rules for everything else in the global economy and another totally different set of rules for the bullion market.
And that's an interesting point. And you also made an interesting point about how the mining supply won't even get baked into the gold and silver market until later down the road. So if we go back to what happened in 2008 when the gold and silver prices crashed, so how long did it take until the market finally realized that the mining supply had been cut down? You said it took 1 or 2 years until it actually showed up on surface?
Well, it affects different parts of the industry in somewhat different manner. For instance, with the explorers, of course, they need to get their financing set up in advance so that they can arrange for their exploration programs. And of course, they're the feeder companies that eventually generate the supply for the whole industry. So so they're the first segment of the industry that's impacted whenever we see this artificial depression created through the bankster shorting. And so this is where the first disconnect occurs in terms of the pipeline, is the exploration side of the business gets totally shut down. And then it becomes a matter of the financing for those companies that are already producing are moving towards production. And so what we see then are delays in projects coming online, plans to expand mines and projects being shelved and things like that. And then, of course, even construction decisions on large new projects being put off. So, for instance, I was looking at someone's article that was listing all of the major gold mining projects that they had heard were or research were going to come online over the next 5 years or so. And there was only one of them or two of them I saw that were actually going to be going into production anytime in the foreseeable future. All the rest were dragged down in financing problems, or various other issues. Of course, with Barrick Gold, they have some interesting issues down in Chile, but that's a different story.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of miners out there having trouble getting financing, as you mentioned. A lot of them are having trouble.
There's no money.
There's no money in the mining sector.
There's no money for brokerages. There's no money from the customers. There's no money to do deals. I don't know if Barrick will survive. It's a double-edged sword for me because I loathe Barrick because they were instrumental in the whole scheme to begin with all their political connections in the United States and Canada. At the same time, I know 3 companies personally that are wonderful companies that are looking for a Barrick to bail them out. Not bail them out, but to have the money to put their good, really great projects into production. Well, what are they going to do if Barrick goes under? Jeff, what do you think?
Well, on a small scale, I've been really impressed with the company called Sandstorm Gold. And what they're basically originally became a gold version of Silver Wheaton. We're all familiar with Silver Wheaton, and they're basically a silver marketing company that buys production streams for wholesale and then sells it for retail. And, of course, that's a good form of financing for these silver mining companies. But Sandstorm Gold has actually gone a little bit further, and beyond merely buying production streams, it's actually gotten actively involved in financing some of these companies, helping them expand their projects in terms, and then getting access to that future production. So they've gone beyond, the pure buying of production streams, in that sort of basic royalty model that we saw with Silver Wheaton, and they've gone into almost the financing side of the mining business. And, of course, as the banks back out and refuse to finance these mining companies, it opens up a tremendous opportunity for any legitimate businesses in the sector that have capital and are willing to deploy it in the sector.
Yeah, we at Wall Street from Main Street have been covering Sandstorm Gold for the past few years. We even have the CEO, Nolan Watson, on for a podcast for the past few times in the past. So,
well, then you probably know more about them than I do.
we have a good relationship with that company, and we're a big fan. We like what they're doing. We have great management. They have great growth. And if people want to learn more about Sandstorm Gold, they can definitely check out our podcast.
A good word for GATA. Have them give us some support then.
But you made an interesting case about Barrick, because I read an article today that someone predicting that China might potentially buy out Barrick. So that's something we should think about with the gold and silver prices down at this level, because a lot of companies are having trouble dealing with production costs, because I studied a lot of the production costs for a lot of the miners, and a lot of them cannot make money in the current environment that they are now. So a lot of them are going to be forced to shut down or cut down production.
Well, at the same time,
because it's the dumbest industry in the whole world. God has been right from the beginning. If gold wasn't suppressed, the price of gold would be $2,500 plus. These morons don't do anything about it. I mean, I don't just talk about things. I've been all over the world on this stuff. South Africa twice. Those people are all going to go out of business if the price of gold stays down here. All those miners gone. It's hard, and they don't do, and the industry does nothing. But they don't even contact us and say, hey, how can we do something? How can you help us? Nothing. They are pathetic.
Jeff, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Bill was saying about, how dumb the industry is. And of course, you just have to look at the actions of the senior miners to see this. Here we are at an incredible bottom, this horrific manipulated bottom in the sector where, you have wonderful mining assets at pennies on the dollar. I mean, tiny fractions of their actual market caps and where it should be their market caps. And of course, here's the time that these larger miners who still have relatively good access to capital should be doing their buying. You know, if these larger mining companies had the sense to bottom feed during these types of scenarios and scoop up the promising juniors and even mid-tier companies, you know, when they're at these scorched earth prices, you know, they could set themselves up for an incredible future growth cycle. But instead, of course, they do the exact opposite. They do most of their buying at the top of the market. You know, sure, their own market cap and share price is at a high, but of course, so is everything they're buying, and so everything they buy is overvalued. And so, you know, we see this cycle after cycle with these large miners, and you know, as Bill says, you know, they're just plain dumb.
Yeah, I agree. The management for most of the mining companies should be fired because a lot of them.
Pardon me. I hate to interrupt you, but I have to tell you a funny story for your audience. So we were first getting going, contacting things. The internet was new. I sent an email to Newmont Mining. Wayne Murdy, I think his name was. And the secretary came back and sent an email back saying they never got the email because they were so afraid of being associated with GATA. Now, I mean, is it the dumbest thing I've ever heard? You send an email back saying you never got the email? That's how ignorant these people are. Anyway, sorry.
I agree. There's a lot of management out there that are afraid to even discuss the idea of if gold and silver being manipulated. I know Keith Neumeyer, the CEO for First Majestic, I think he believes that there is some type of manipulation going on in the silver market.
This Keith is, look, I know Keith personally. He's been in my home in Vancouver when I lived there. He's a class act. He's a great guy. He gets it. I wish he'd do more for us, but he's a class act guy, and his costs of his silver mines are like 50% less than anybody else. The guy's a legend.
I agree. He's a smart CEO and one of the few best CEO mining companies out there, and people should definitely check out the silver miner, First Majestic Silver.
If you talk to Keith, you'd say that Bill said he's like the class of class.
Well, we're trying to get Keith back on for another podcast, so I'll let him know that.
Okay.
So I could tell that both of you are expressed disappointment in how the management for mining companies haven't come out and publicly expressed their frustration in what's going on in silver, gold, and silver markets.
From anybody? Has anybody heard one thing from these?
From you?
These
the
nincompoops?
Yeah.
That's understated. They're nincompoops.
Well, I think a lot of them are worried that if they talk about manipulation, they might be considered, conspiracy theorists and stuff like that. So I think a lot of them keep quiet on that issue and rather not talk about that.
Conspiracy is the way business is done. Anybody who talks about conspiracy theorists in a negative term is clueless. It's like they think the earth is flat. They're idiots. That's the way big business is done in the world. Market manipulation. I mean, Apple just the other day was charged with price-fixing conspiracy. That's the way it's done in all these businesses. If they can get away with it, they do it. The gold industry and the executives, for the most part, are just like out to lunch, taking advantage of shareholders. I'm sick of it.
Yeah, that's precisely true. You know, there's all of this manipulation out in the open. There's the LIBOR scandal, which of course is now totally exposed. You have the Attorney General of the United States pledging to cover up all financial crime on Wall Street to protect the U.S. financial sector. You know, when we have open conspiracy at the highest levels of government, and yet we have people who get phobic every time they hear the word conspiracy. As Bill says, it's utterly laughable. You know, I got so frustrated with this dynamic that I actually wrote a piece entitled "The Non-Conspiracy Nuts." Because, you know, if you continue to bury your head in the sand and refuse to believe in what is open public knowledge, that goes beyond skepticism towards willful blindness.
I agree there. There's a lot of stuff that's been considered conspiracy theory a decade ago that now actually became true. The LIBOR scandal is one of them. Even the Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme scandal was considered a conspiracy out there until it blew up in the public.
How about Enron? which
and
was
Enron.
considered the finest company by Fortune or Forbes magazine for 5 years in a row. Big conspiracy. That's all it was.
Yep. And even the government illegal wiretapping that was considered a conspiracy theory until Snowden came out and blew the whistle on that. So there's a lot of stuff that's been considered conspiracy theory that actually came out and became fact, and hopefully we'll see that in the gold and silver market. So I want to ask you guys, now that the gold and silver have been settling around these prices, what will be the next Cadillac to start moving gold a lot higher, in your opinion? Bill, I want to start with you first.
Well, I don't know. Jeff knows what I write about changing of trading patterns, and we've seen it last week and today with the shares, and the proof's in the pudding. And I think we're close to this thing exploding. We talked about this, and from my commentary, my sources, in last March about August, it was going to go bonkers, and here we are, and it just smells like it. I mean, it seems like the bad guys are running out of ammunition. So I'm not going to talk about tomorrow, the next day, but I think soon it's going to go bonkers. Bonkers.
And Jeff, there's a lot of people that are saying that we'll need another Armageddon-type event for gold to start moving up again, like the Lehman collapse. What do you think it will be the next Cadillac to get gold moving higher again? Do we need an Armageddon-type event, or is it going to be something else?
Well, I certainly understand that sort of reasoning because, look at what we saw last fall. We had a clear breakout in the sector, where prices broke through all resistance, moved, into clear territory where we should have seen an extended rally, and then somehow we had, the banking cabal stuff that rally back down, stifle it completely, put the sector back into its trading range, and then, of course, set the stage for what we saw this spring. So, that really surprised me because, that was, certainly in my lesser years of experience than Bill, that was the most heavy-handed suppression of the market I've seen during a rising market. We've seen, of course, them launch all sorts of operations in times of crisis and that. But, what we saw last fall was, what seemed to be total clear sailing, everything in favor for gold and silver, and then they still managed to stuff prices back down. So, I understand people saying, yes, we need some sort of Armageddon scenario. I don't think that's actually true. I think it's more along the lines of, we're simply going to have to wait and see. For instance, when we had the big rally through 2009, 2011, a big part of that was triggered from the IMF gold sale. It was supposed to be a bearish event. This 400 tons of gold they were dumping on the market was going to, suppress the entire sector. And then India snapped up half of it in one gulp, and it turned into this major bullish event. So, it could be as simple as something that was originally perceived as bearish, suddenly flip-flopping to a bullish perspective, and thus sentiment changes. I don't think it has to be, some sort of end-of-the-world event necessarily.
And that's an interesting point. And I have one final question before I let you guys go. With Hong Kong largest gold refinery revealing that they buy Western Central Bank gold on the open market and melt it down, do you think the U.S. has anywhere near 8,000 tons of gold left, or this number closer to zero?
Well, GATA spent $250,000 putting a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal, a color ad, in January of 2008 about this subject. There'd never been an audit for, maybe ever. They say 1955. Nobody knows. It's the most secretive, stupid subject in the world. I mean, what business or anything doesn't have a legitimate audit? This thing is the biggest farce of all time. It's because it's controlled by the big money and rich and powerful. It's a joke. God is going to stand out for exposing this thing. That's what we do, and we're going to continue on, and eventually it'll be a big deal. But it'll be like everything else. It won't be a big deal to the individual American suffers terribly, unfortunately, and it's a big scandal, like the rest of them. Like all the people ripped off by Enron and Madoff. That's the way it is.
And Jeff, do you have anything to add?
Well, I just look at what we've seen with the gold leasing and that whole shadow market for funneling gold onto, into the shorting and into the global marketplace. And of course, the question becomes, we know that a lot of this leased gold is being leased multiple times, to 4 different owners or 10 different or users or whatever. So the question becomes, if you start off with this 8,000 tons of gold, and we know that some of it's being leased on multiple users, the question becomes how many. So, if, for instance, if you have 1,000 tons that's been leased out 1,000 times, then maybe the other 7,000 tons is still sitting there because they haven't had to bother doing that. But, if they can't find people that are quite that gullible, then, maybe it's all gone because they had to, funnel it all out bit by bit. So it's really difficult to try to guess a number because we don't know the precise nature of the crimes that have taken place. And
I'm sorry, Bill and Jeff, I'd like to thank you guys for coming on for Wall Street from Main Street podcast. I do believe that the gold and silver market was manipulated in the past few months. A lot of people out there that don't believe in manipulation believe that the market were both overbought. If you look at the gold market, it's been going double-digit return for the past decade. So a correction like this was warranted.
No, let me interject here.
Go ahead.
Before this correction, everybody was saying if the gold price had kept up with inflation, it would be $2,500 an ounce. It's
I agree.
Ludicrous to think what's going on here is real. We don't have time. We're ending this thing to get into a whole thing about the no solution environment the U.S. is in. This is going to be the biggest story of all time, and I thank you for having me and Jeff on.
I appreciate having you guys on. I believe that another reason why the manipulation happened is because the Federal Reserve and other central banks don't want people owning gold. So if they knock down the price, people will start selling and leave. And it's a volatile market, so people don't like volatility, so they'll leave if they can't take it anymore. And so that's why I believe another reason why I think the gold and silver market was manipulated the past few months. And also, with the article that you, Jeff, and people like Eric Fraud have been putting out showing that, evidence of manipulation by gold leasing and other factors as well that really supported my case as well. And we appreciate everything you guys do. Well,
it's been a big pleasure appearing here with Bill for the first time, and I hope to get a chance to do it again in the future.
Be my pleasure.
Great. And Bill, if people want to find out more about GATA, where can they go? Could you give out your link?
Well, I have a website, Le Metropole Cafe, www.lemetropolcafe.com. They can sign up for a 2-week free trial. They can show up at GATA.org to get on the GATA free list. Chris Powell does a great job, and that's it.
And Jeff, if people want to find out more about what you do, where can they go?
Our website is BullionBullsCanada.com, and I put out regular commentaries there, and we have a very active forum and community, so people are welcome to join us there and dive into the dialogue.
Great. Well, thank you both for coming on. Hopefully you can come back on in the future.
My pleasure. Thanks, Mo.